Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Think, Engage, Thrive. We've got some really good show tonight. We've got Christopher Hensley on. We're going to go through some background on He's got some really funny stories about entrepreneurship. And as you know, we like to bring you always some good stories about entrepreneurship. We want to give you the good, the bad, and the funny stories of if you want to be an entrepreneur, you're aspiring to be an entrepreneur. We want you to know the reality of doing it. It's a great thing when you can do it successfully, but sometimes there are stumbling blocks, as you've heard. Anybody who's followed us has heard some of the stories that people have told, but at the end of the day, it's very rewarding and very fun. So Chris is he's got some great stories. I'll tell you just a couple of things he had early on. He's a big background in finance, big background in money management, big background in that type of stuff. But he also had an eBay store back in the early days of eBay, which I think is going to be a funny story for you all to hear, because there's a lot of you who started selling on different platforms, whether it be Amazon or eBay and things like that, and turned it into a business. So he's got a really good story about that. But essentially, he's in the financial services world. And he's also very well known with his podcast, Money Matters. And he's done a lot of things with Wall Street Journal, and a lot of publications have spoken to him about, finance, consumer credit, things that are necessary. And it's good for entrepreneurs, right? Because a lot of times when you either make money from selling your business, you have to think about how you're going to invest that money. So you really have to understand it. So, he's a certified professional in finance. So it's going to be a good story. So let's bring him in and let him tell it, because I think he's got some really funny stuff to talk about. Hey, Chris, how you doing?
Hi, Phil. I'm doing great. Didn't expect a standing ovation here. But yeah, I'm doing great. I got a lot of build up here on my eBay story. So,
Well,
um,
I thought it was a funny story, and I like funny stories because we've all done some crazy things in our life to get started in business. So that's one of the ones that I think is really I think it's really funny. So
absolutely. I know most entrepreneurs, the ones that I've met, if they've become successful, there's a story, right?
yeah,
there's a story that got them there. 90% of people who start up a business fail. And so usually there's going to be that background of, I did this, I did that. The one that you mentioned, which this is new territory. I don't think I've even discussed this before with other people there. But so, as a financial advisor in the early days in my 20s, I had a mortgage company. That was one of the first things I did in my 20s. But the one that you were talking about was the eBay company. So this was back in the 90s, kind of in the heyday of eBay there.
but when you say a mortgage company, are you talking about like mortgage brokering, or were you writing mortgages?
Yes, no, it was mortgage brokering. And this was, me and my wife, we bought a franchise before we were 25. So we talk about idea, this like, let's pick the hardest, biggest thing that we can bite off and go at it,
How,
Uh,
how,
so
do, how do those franchises work? Because I've never heard of a franchise for mortgage brokering. So that's new to me.
Yes, so this was back early 90s, and so we invested, I want to say, about $10,000 into a company where we got licensed as loan officers in our state, and they connected us to different companies that had the relationships. And this was, we both had kind of a finance background. We both come from banks. My wife was a
Yeah.
teller, for many years, and so that was one of the things that we started.
Yeah.
Just didn't work. I wrote some loans, but I did get my feet wet on my sales training. So, when people sign up for being entrepreneurs, they don't necessarily think they're going to be marketers or salespeople, right? And so this kind of got my eyes open to that. pointed me in the right direction, which a lot of the training that I have now, even my negotiating skills, I learned those in a flea market when we were doing the eBay business, because we were resellers, right? We actually, one of the things that we did is we sold vintage toys, collectibles, right? If people ever seen the movie 40-Year-Old Virgin, where he's doing the collectibles and the toys and stuff. That's very much similar to what we did. We bought out a basement of a company that was in New York, and my wife took part of her 401k money and bought we had this giant 18-wheeler back up and unload a bunch of collectibles. And what was really neat, a lot of it was pop culture, toy stuff, a lot of stuff that you could see, you could just turn around, put it on eBay and sell it. But there was about 50 years of vintage collectible stuff that I had to get a crash course in. What is this stuff worth? How does this work? And then we had a separate kind of business there where we were reselling little type toys, these big plastic toys that you see in people's backyards that their kids play on. We would get those used. I would bleach them down, power wash them, and then ship them through Greyhound and freight them all across the U.S. It's crazy, right? But these were kind of the heydays of power selling when Meg Whitman was still the CEO, and when gas was affordable enough that you could freight stuff on Greyhound across the U.S. And so those were some of the most fun days. But yeah, even today, the ability to always ask for a discount, that came out of going through the flea markets here in Houston and knowing that everything's a little bit negotiable and being confident to get out of your comfort zone to ask, right? Worst they can say is no. And sometimes it's expected.
So let me just to take a step back. Why do you think the mortgage franchise didn't work? You think it was outside economics? Do you think it was external forces, or do you think it was something else?
Oh, no, probably it was because I was super young. I'm almost 50 now, but I was in my early 20s, right? And, entrepreneurs we've got that it's in our blood, right? If we keep showing up, we're a little bit crazy, right? But that was my first attempt. And I had no background in real estate, or I had the finance background. And so I've always been drawn to numbers. And so the loan stuff seemed to be good. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs realize this, okay, where am I going to get my clients from? That's like one of the very first problems you run into. And as a young 20-year-old, back then, there's a book, I keep this one pretty close. Don't use it anymore, but I taught myself how to cold call.
Oh, wow.
It was a long time ago. Nobody cold calls anymore.
Well, we do. We just do it via email. Right?
Yes, it's different. It's different. But the idea of just picking up the phone and calling, right? So the skills that I taught myself to market myself as a loan officer, that I wrote some loans, but it didn't really, pan out for us, right? But I was able to take that. And when I started in my financial planning career, this was, again, back in the days where we actually sat in cubicles. If you've ever seen the movie Boiler Room, hate to say that, but I started with American Express Financial Advisors, and they literally stuffed people into a cubicle. We got there at 7 o'clock in the morning. We did not leave until 9:30. And because I had I'm a lifelong learner, I had taken the time to kind of teach myself how to cold call. I was really, really good at it.
Yeah.
Now this is not something this is not a sustainable business model. So if you're listening and you're an entrepreneur, don't think this is necessarily repeatable at this day and age. But back then, we had these little fish bowls that we put up all around the city. People would drop their business card in, and they would get a free meal, but then they would also be invited in for a financial plan.
Yeah.
All of these things that I kind of cringe now talking about. I don't do that anymore. But those are the things that kind of help, when you don't know that you're going to be in sales and marketing and you end up wearing that hat, whether you're a plumber, whether you're, doesn't matter what business you go and start up, you're going to have to take the responsibility of wearing some of those hats when you first get started. Right.
Yeah. I don't think that anybody that I've ever met uh, that's an entrepreneur did their first business and that was it. I mean, they where they said, "Oh, it was great. It was a great experience
Right.
for me."
That's
And
the best
I
thing
was
I ever
highly,
did.
yeah. I think I could tell you I've said it a million times on the show. My first business was a total disaster. I was in my 20s and I started it. I thought I knew more than I did, and it was a total disaster. And it was a failure of leadership. I didn't manage process very well, but I still, and I say it all the time, the things I learned in that first business I carry with me today, because I still think about all the mistakes I made then and why I made them, and how to avoid making them. So yeah, it's
Absolutely.
never ashamed to fail, never ashamed to
Absolutely.
yeah.
I will piggyback on that and just say I don't even like to call them failures, although if we're being honest, but I don't like to call them failures because they are lessons, and these are
Yeah,
lessons that I carry on to my clients today. So I work with a lot of successful business owners now, and some of the mistakes that I made when I got started, we pass those along right away, and I have those difficult conversations with them when they're trying to get capital or funding, and they're maybe not on the planet Earth, right? When it comes to if they're playing the tax game, they're trying to hide your taxable income. You
yeah,
can't have it both ways, right?
yeah,
All of those things come back into play. So these are lessons that we learn.
yeah. But I I keep thinking the reason that I love your eBay story is when you always say, here's the 18 wheeler backing up with all these things that we had bought. And I just know in my lifetime of businesses that I've done, you you plan, you organize, and then you start buying whatever it is. I was in the food business, or I needed packaging or whatever, or we were in the nutraceuticals. And when that truck backs up, reality reality sets in, and that door
Yes,
opens, and you look at what's in that truck and you go, "Oh my God, what did I do to myself?" So I can
that
relate to
that
that story.
that is the oh crap moment. Okay, we're really doing this, and what do we do now? Yes,
Yeah,
that's
we
the
have no
fastest
choice.
way to learn a business.
Yeah, we have no choice but to move forward now because we own all this stuff. Yeah, it's great. That's funny. People don't. I don't think that a lot of people remember eBay in the beginning and that whole process. And you're right. In 40-year-old virgin, she had the whole store. Bring your products to me, and I'll sell them on eBay.
Right.
It was a whole. It was a
That was a
bigger.
business model.
Yeah, it was a
That was
business
a
model.
a gold mine and a business model, and everybody was all about online auctions when that was a new thing, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Now it's a complete, that's how fast technology moves, and it makes us say we got to keep up with the times,
yeah.
and our business models will evolve and change, and that's something that entrepreneurs got to know that going into.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's true. Business models change. You have to know the pivot. You have to know when to change and change with the times. Because when you look at eBay today, it's almost a buy now model, right? It's got
Right.
the auctions are still out there, and you could do that, but it's almost a buy now model, similar to and I've seen uh, people or brands put stores up on eBay to sell. So it's
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, and I think there for certain business models it works very well, but when it got started, I mean, there was think of shows like Storage Wars. We literally went and bought out storage
Yeah.
units. We did reselling. If you as a couple, if you like antiquing, that sort of stuff, we loved doing this for about 3 years,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And then things changed up, and we both had the finance background, and I knew I would always go back to financial planning. I think it was just in the back of my head. But the good news is when I finally got back into it, I broke away from these captive agencies, right, that are really bad towards how they pay. Every sales organization ends up screwing their people as far as paying them, right? And so when I got into it again, I'm going to own my own business, and it's going to be independent, and we're so that it was a blessing in disguise, because at the end of the day, that's exactly what happened. So
Yeah. 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 No, I think that everything is a learning experience and gets you down the path to where you need it to be. We had an entrepreneur on, a very successful one, a while ago, His name is Joel, and he told a story about how he came over from Cuba during the Mariel boat lift and didn't, with his family, didn't speak any English, whatever. But the short part of the story is that he started out in flea markets buying and selling things, and he met a guy who was selling men's underwear, believe it or not, and he wound up selling the product, and then he built his own brand and then put it online in e-commerce, and over 15 years became very, very, very successful, and then sold all his businesses recently. But it's you learn about selling, and you're 100% right. you know, I meet entrepreneurs all the time that develop things. They develop SaaS products, or they develop a product that they want to sell, but they never think about the sales and marketing side of it. And they never allocate enough money to the sales and marketing side of it, which is the most important thing. Because I don't care what kind of product you have. If you can't sell it, if you don't have a customer for it, you have nothing.
I can say I'm at a point where I know where all my clients are. 20 years into this business, I've solved the marketing puzzle, right? I know where my clients are coming from. But when you first get started in a business and you're in that first 3 years or so,
Yeah.
you better darn well put your marketing hat on. And people, they get lofty ideas that, I'm going to outsource this, I'm going to outsource that.
Yeah.
And you don't have the funds or capital to do that.
Yeah.
So, yes, down the road, you can automate and you can delegate and you can do all of those to systemize and do all those things that we know successful businesses end up.
Yeah.
But when you're first getting started, you end up having to wear a lot of hats that you were not expecting to wear. So I never let anybody off the hook. I always tell them, it's your responsibility, and it's a little bit selfish. So if you're the best financial advisor, if you're the best plumber, if you're the best whatever business it is, and you don't learn how to offer your services to more people, you're being stingy about your service to the world. And that's the way I look at it. So
just not to belabor the point, but you had this eBay business, and then you and your wife decided to sell it, or you just shut it down, or?
Yeah, so this went on for, I would say, about 3 years. So we started in our house when the 18-wheeler backed up, right? We ended up getting a warehouse in the middle of Bel Air, which that's actually where my office is now. It's actually about 5 minutes from here. So we had a little warehouse there where we would fill it with all the toys and these big backyard toys. And we did that for about 3 years. We sold out all of our inventory, and at its highest point, we had people that we had met at the flea market that were actually picking for us. So they'd say, "Hey, we see this thing, would you buy this from us?" We say, "Yeah, how much?" And then they would bring it to us, and then I would bleach it down and power wash it, and we would ship it across the US. And then the collectibles and the toys, and we had some posters and that sort of stuff. That was easy because that stuff would sell right away. We did some buy it nows and some auction stuff. The ones that were the most interesting, so many things that we found that, we paid pennies on the dollar and they went for high dollar amounts. I always use Barbie as an example. I didn't know anything about Barbie, nor did I want to know anything about Barbie, but we had stuff that was, hundreds of dollars of Barbie stuff. So I darn well went out and educated myself on that. And, we don't want to leave any money on the table. So, but and it spoke to being a kid who grew up in the 80s, having a toy business. Think of all the toys you didn't get, right? This was a chance for us to relive that and get, we got a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Even though it didn't stay around too long, we would sell it. It did check that little, the inner child in all of us. So, that, yes.
So then from there, so you sell it, you're done with the eBay piece, and then you move back into financial planning.
Yes. Yeah. So we both went back into the financial planning world. Of course, this was probably this was 2008, 2009. So that was not the best time to get in. It was a rough start. But, at the end of the day, where I ended up is with an independent broker dealer. So that pulled me away. from these companies that when I started at, one of the reasons I always wanted to be, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs have this inside, they want to be their own boss,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And if you have any sales background, if you work for a sales organization, they're pretty famous for hiring people and then changing the pay structure around.
Yeah.
And a lot of these companies, that happen over and over. And so at the end of the day, it's rough when you have to start, put the shingle up.
Yeah.
You're paying your overhead, you're paying for your phone, you're paying for your office space, but you have the freedom that you don't have to worry about meeting these sales quotas anymore. You don't have to worry about this, that, and the other. It really becomes about educating. And so then that's when I said, I'm not a sales guy, I'm an educator. And then it allows me to go back into the role I originally wanted to start with, right? And so that's the freedom you get once you're successful and you've worked it. But it's like anything. You have to put the time in and the hustle, right?
Yeah, I think that it's not as much about being your own boss as it is about freedom. The freedom to make the decisions, freedom to make the decisions about business that you want to make, freedom to run your own projections, because you do have quotas. They're just self-imposed quotas. You have to hit a certain amount because you've got to cover your expenses. So I understand it fully, fully. And I think but it's, to me, entrepreneurship, it's always about freedom, right? I want to be the one
Absolutely.
to make those decisions about where this business is heading. And if I'm wrong, it falls on my shoulders. But if I'm right,
better or worse, right?
exactly.
Like you could be your own worst boss, right? But you have the freedom of really making those decisions on your own. Dialing in your own business model,
Yeah.
your own business plan, and so that is. I think that's what a lot of people really want. That's what spoke to me about being an entrepreneur, for sure.
Yeah. And the other piece is the freedom to manage my team the way that I want to manage them. I think, and I had a business back in the 90s that I sold to a supermarket chain, and I had to go work for the supermarket chain. And it was amazing to me that I was not allowed to run my team the way I wanted to run them because we had so many constraints about how things worked, and it was bizarre. And they were an underachieving supermarket chain, but once they cleared it all out and revamped management, it turned into a great chain. But I wasn't there for very long. I moved on to selling beauty products or creating a beauty brand, actually. So
that is, for me, that is the biggest weight off my shoulders, right? So even though it's a small team of two, it's me and my assistant, right? When my wife comes home and she tells me about personality conflicts at work and she's with a larger company, I don't miss that part of it.
I know.
And as a leader, former leader, manager, and all of that, part of leading is personalities, right? So that is the one thing that I'm like, well, I don't miss that part of it. But yeah, you have the freedom to kind of choose the way that you manage and the way that you run your business. So that part is liberating, and that evolves. The team that I have is my assistant's remote in about 50 miles away from me. That's not how it originally was. This is post-COVID, post-pandemic. And because of the clients that I work with, the age group, they're 55 and up. Most of them are on the other side of retirement. There was the idea that, how we're talking tonight virtually, that would never be, my business model would never be that way. Fast forward after the pandemic, this is the preferred method of a lot of my clients, even if they're here in Houston. They don't like to come in physically to the office anymore.
Yeah, the world has changed. I will say that I built a beauty business with a supermodel back in the early 80s, and we were virtual only because we had to be. We started out on the shopping channels here in Canada and other places, and so we were on the road constantly, going and doing shows because that's how you sold. Yes, we had product on Amazon. Yes, we had product on the website, but then we would have to meet with the manufacturer, and we would have to, so we were virtual only because it didn't pay to have an office. We were just constantly on the road. And we did have to outsource things, certain functions. But with the business I have today, after that, I did a shaving business, and then we sold that, and I started an agency, and we had physical offices, two of them actually, and people in the offices. And then when COVID hit, everybody, originally it was 90 days, right? They were closing the schools
Right.
for 90 days. Everything was shut down for 90 days. So everybody was like, oh, I'm going to go to my parents' house, or I'm going to go here, I'm going to go there for the 90 days and wait it out. And it just never ended. And then we were sitting there, one of my partners and I, going, it's now a year later, and we have to re-up these leases. Do we want them? Because nobody's coming back. And so we got
Right.
rid of them. And then my partner actually moved to Michigan. So so it just became 100% virtual. And then you're right. All of the clients don't want to either come to us or us to come to them. Let's just, we do it this way. And so I think it's become the standardized business model, right? Except in some instances, like banks and things like that, you have people coming in, but
you want to get out there and press the flesh and shake the hands and connect, right? But that it's a different ball game. And even the age group that I work with, the digital literacy, we would say, we're worried that they won't be able to bull.
yeah,
After the pandemic, I've got 80-year-olds who are on here with Zoom meetings now, and that's the way it is. So that's when we talk about entrepreneurs having to adapt their business model. That's part of it, right?
yeah,
Being able to pivot and adjust, and make sure that your model is sustainable. And when these black swan type events come online, this is a real test of whether your
yeah,
business will survive or not. So,
yeah, yeah. Well, that one was a scary one, that period of
yeah,
time.
yeah,
But no, I like having, as long as you have the tools and you have the right people in place and you manage it correctly. I like the decentralized model.
yep,
You can do things a lot better, a lot faster. When you think about productivity of people, they get up in the morning, they can sit and relax and have their coffee before they start work, versus getting up, scrambling to get dressed, drink your coffee, get in the car, and deal with a half an hour of traffic, which puts you in a different frame of mind. And then the other piece is, I found, is that people tend to work later on their own because
right.
they don't have that commute, and they wind up doing additional work or extra work or doing things on the weekend. Not that we force it, but they do it on their own. So I find that to be interesting.
Phil, I 100% agree with you. You know who doesn't agree with you? The CEOs. A lot of the CEOs are not on board with the remote working thing. And I think this is a crisis of management, a crisis of leadership. We've just learned, all these people that are graduating from business schools who learned the skills in management and leadership, we left out the part about managing people remotely. So now
Yeah.
we have to adjust. We have to go back and learn how to deal with it. But it's a great thing. Yeah, I mean, my assistant working remote, if you've managed teams remotely, I agree. Some people work harder and their personality types fit for that. So I think it's something that as business leaders, we have to go back and adjust. The CEOs are used to things that they can control and they're used to. And I say, if they don't get on board, we'll be, several years out and not adjusting to it. So we'll see how that plays out.
Yeah. The other thing that I noticed is that meetings tend to be more efficient and effective when you go to when you're in an office. In my experience, and I have, prior to being an entrepreneur, I've had to work with others, but in offices and work in companies. And to me, it's there's a meeting that's called, and you go into the conference room, and everybody starts talking and glad handing for a while. There's food, and people sit around for, so 20 minutes, 25 minutes of the meeting is wasted. And then people start talking, and you're having this meeting, and a meeting that should have been done in 15 minutes turned into an hour and a half. And I personally don't like long meetings. I like to get to the point. This is what we're doing, and I have
Yes.
people that understand that. And I also have people. One of my flaws is when I say something, I think everybody understands what I'm saying because I've had it in my head and I've had the conversation with myself in my head for about an hour. So when I say it, I just take for granted that everybody understands what I said. And at least I have people that say, we don't know what the heck you're talking about. And that,
Right. It's like,
which is what
slow
I need.
down, Phil.
Yeah.
You need to tell us a little bit more. Give us a little bit more information. I think that's called, what is that? Osmosis. And that is something that a lot of leaders have that you're very big picture.
Yeah.
And if you've got the right people in there, they are willing to raise their hand and say, Phil, stop, give me the information I need. And it helps us, right. to get it done. So.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't mind when somebody tells me they don't understand what I'm talking about, and I don't care how they say it. I don't take offense to it. We don't take. I don't have the. I don't ever play that "I'm the boss" card. I don't like it.
Right.
So,
right.
You know,
I love it. Same. Very much the same.
Yeah. So okay. So now you're well entrenched in financial planning. You've had to now go back to your hat of how do I get clients, right? I've got to have lead generation. I've got to get clients in. I've got to have a stream of clients coming in, right?
Yes, absolutely. So nowadays, the way that I get clients is through webinars, but this has also evolved. This used to be dinner seminars where I would host local restaurants, and I would do a lot of public speaking and seminars, right? But after the pandemic, we ended up switching to webinars, which we've actually been able to scale, and we moved it outside of just Houston, Texas, now Ohio, and California. So in some ways it's a good thing. In some ways I've had to adapt because I'm used to, speaking in a large group. And as we know, the virtual stuff is not necessarily, it's similar, not necessarily the same, right? So these are all things that, we're having to adapt to. But I do, at the end of the day, I have a repeatable marketing system. And so that's whatever business you're in, you have to be able to solve the where is my income coming from first, right? Where are my clients coming from, right? And so once you do that, you're able to wear the other hats that you want to do. But that is luckily at this point, that piece of it we've got solved. Everything else still moving target.
Yeah. Yeah, no, you're 100% right. I mean, you've got to have a model for getting clients, even if you're an e-commerce company, right? You're running ads, or you're doing social, or you're doing steps to get customers into your website, so that they'll convert. It's the same thing in your business. You've got to have some sort of a lead generation system to get those people in that are going to convert.
100%. So ours starts with an email. We send an email out to state employees, either here in Texas or Ohio or California. And I specialize in working with pensions. So people who have state pensions and helping them coordinate their Social Security and their pension. So as I say all of that, right, that's a very specific niche, right? So that's one thing as an entrepreneur is figuring out like who your target market is. And then once I made that leap, and it was also an age for me, it was people over 55. That's where, my business is at. But figuring that piece out, that was a big magnifier on everything being a little bit more efficient. We were fishing in the right pools. We were talking to the right people. That really helped get some momentum into the business once we figured out that part of it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's in any business. I think it's important to have a marketing persona, who you're talking to. Like you said, you're very specific. Over 55, it looks like this, and then that enables you to really hyper target. I think a lot of times in business, people just think, well, my product fits with everybody, so I'm just going to go and market to everybody. And marketing to everybody is much more difficult than marketing to your specific customer, because then you can speak a language. The language that somebody over 55 speaks and somebody under 25 speaks are two entirely different languages.
100%. In fact, if I seem a little relaxed, I've adopted the retirement mindset. All my clients, once they stop working, they're just a little bit more laid back.
Yeah,
Things
yeah,
are, just roll off a little bit more. But yes, 100%. That is a thing. Um, when we drill down on the that age group and that target market, there's the benefit of everybody I see after that, right? So if I'm 20 years into the business, every client that I meet with have already gotten to the other side of retirement, and I'm able to share their experiences with the people who are just starting. And so it's a kind of a compounding effect, and that's with any business. If you're very specific with who you're working with, you've seen those questions come up before, right? That's that wisdom and that experience of doing something for a very long time.
yeah, yeah. I think I tell on, like I said before, young entrepreneurs, people that develop early businesses, whether it's a product or a SaaS product, they put all their focus, all their effort into developing the product, and they don't think about how they're going to sell it. And I think a lot of times, I'll tell you, it amazes me because a lot of times people just think, well, I'm going to put up a website and I'll start doing some social media and people will buy it. And I always say, in my lifetime and of doing this, it's never happened that way. You
Right.
need those pieces. You need to have your website. You need to have social media. You need to have your messaging. But if you think that that's going to get you from zero to, where you need to be, I'm sorry, it's not.
Yeah, and I would even say I would piggyback on it and say that's just the getting in the gate part. Right? All of the things that you just mentioned, a really good business needs to have all of that stuff. You have to have some presence on social media. You have to have your marketing platform. You have to be doing all that stuff. Your press. Let me introduce you to my press department.
Yeah.
That's it. Right. When you're an entrepreneur and you're just getting started. Right. So, absolutely. They have to be doing all of that stuff, but then there's something else they got to do
Yeah.
to make it work. Right.
Yeah, it amazes me. We were involved with or worked closely. We still do work closely with a company that develops prototypes for people and helps them get it manufactured. And people have ideas. And there was a guy who had this great product for golf. It was an absolutely great training tool for putting. The guy was ingenious with it, and he I looked at it and I said, it's brilliant. I have been a golfer in my life, and so I thought it was a great piece. I said, how much money do you have allocated for marketing? Because this is going to take you're going to have to do commercials, you're going to have to do ads, you're going to have to do these things. And he's like, well, no, I don't have to do any of that because I'm a PGA pro, and
Uh,
I've got my website with the PGA Pro, and I've got these contacts, so I'm going to give them those while they're out, playing tournaments, and people will see it and buy it. And I said, okay. And he basically told me I didn't know what I was talking about. That
uh,
he had a better way of going about it. I said, okay, have at it. Thank you. And I like your product, and call me in a year. And
yeah.
a
He
year,
wasn't there.
a year later, he did. It was over a year that he called back and said, I don't understand. Is there a way we can meet? I need to talk to you. I don't understand. This person had it and this person had it. I said, you're talking to the wrong people. It's the golfer. It's the Saturday golfer. It's the guy who works in an office all week. That's the guy who's going to buy this because that's the guy who wants to get better at putting, right? The guys that you're talking to all have coaches sitting next to him going, okay, a little bit to the right, a little bit to the left. So I said, they don't need this. So
I'm smiling real big because I know exactly the type you're talking about. So
yeah.
these are the people that their business plan was either they were an athlete formerly, right?
Right.
Or they had something in their natural market. Maybe it was a family member or something like that. That's great for the first couple of years. What happens after that?
Right.
So you fast forward 3 years, 5 years out. If they didn't figure out the rest of it, they're probably off to other things. So.
Yeah. 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 And unfortunately, he never was able to get it off the ground. It was a great, great, great product. He just couldn't get it
Right.
off the ground because he didn't have the money to do it. He didn't allocate any funds to do it, and he didn't want to entertain the idea of partnering with a larger company that could get him there. Right.
And I feel a little bad making fun of that guy because now I'm thinking this is one of the hardest things he's done in his life. Of course, he's not going to know, but we're just to say there are many things that you have to learn when you get started, right? So,
Yeah.
and it's one of those things you either learn them or you don't, and you're out of business and you're doing something else. So.
Yeah, it's true. So, we always tell people. I mentor at the University of Maryland School of Entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
And I mentor young entrepreneurs, and I always tell them, make sure you have a healthy budget for marketing, especially in this day and age, or unless you have some idea of strategy. Because, and I have done things with no money. I've done it with razors, where I've done some stunts, things, PR stunts, that type of stuff, and they work. But you have to have a plan for that. You have to know what you're doing. Even in financial planning, I'm sure that there are some creative things that you can do. Like you said, with webinars don't really cost you any money to really create. It's time,
Right.
right?
It's time. Yep. Yep.
So,
And so that's scalable. That's something doable. But you're talking to probably one of the most frugal people you'll ever talk to. So I'm a big fan of bootstrapping, and I'm an optimist. But when I meet with entrepreneurs, and this is the old banker in me, I a lot of times I'll try to burst their bubble. Not that way. I'm doing it because I'm trying to help them. So
yeah,
and if they're still around after that second or third business, then I will encourage them. But I want them to have their eyes open. That's why I always say bootstrapping, like when it comes to funding a company or having capital and that sort of stuff, that's where I would point them to begin with, right? Because I don't want them to put too much online. And then sure enough, every business owner I know, they're going to be not declaring they're going to write off everything that they possibly can. And then when it comes time to getting a loan and they can't produce 2 years of tax documents showing a profit and loss where you're actually making some money, you can't be surprised, right? So,
yeah,
and these are all things I tell people, these are things you need to know. You need to, meet with a business banker, learn about funding, learn about getting capital and that sort of thing. But don't feel like that relationship that you're going to have with a banker is somebody that you can just tap and they're going to be the best expert. You need to get organized. You need to know, what your finances are like, what your credit score is like. It's going to make you go through the process of putting a good business plan together, one that you have to vet and you probably have to pitch, right?
yeah.
All of these things can really you can get people to help you. But I caution that, I see companies out there where sometimes when you're a business owner, people see the big sucker there, right? And I see companies that will charge people money to get like a federal tax ID number, which is something you can literally get for free yourself.
Yeah.
And so I always caution people. It's not to say don't ask for the help of an expert when you need it. Yes, do that, but don't let yourself not have the responsibility to educate and be responsible for not making some of the mistakes that I made when I was younger, right?
Oh, we've all made mistakes, but and I think they make us better at what we do as long as we reflect on them. And I think you have to have a bit of the ability to have personal insights or insight into yourself. So because we all make mistakes. It's a question of not making the same mistake over and over again.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Absolutely.
So has there ever been a time, your business is a bit different than say consumer products or e-commerce or whatever, but has there been a time where you hit maybe an oh crap moment where you thought this is not going to work and I'm going to wind up having to go back to work for somebody?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, you have yes, especially first getting started. Right now, 20 years into it, we're doing good. But 5-10 years into it, having to do Uber, right?
Yeah.
This is where you find out whether you're really committed to this thing or not. And so that's when I mentioned earlier. Some entrepreneurs, it's just in their blood; they have to do it. But yes, there's many roadblocks to. It's one of the hardest things you'll ever do. Right. So, you got to have your eyes open and know you're going into that process. in my business, it's that 80-20 rule, right? There's about 20% of clients that are large enough to support my whole operations. And then there's a lot of ones that are smaller. And I purposely, I work with mom and pop. So I'm not ultra high net worth clients. It's people that are, they're teachers, university professors, right? And that's purpose. That's what I like. That's why I do that. But yeah, it's that 20% there driving the revenue until you get there. It's a grind and a hustle. And you're paying all of your operating expenses yourself. So in that part, that's going to be very similar to almost any other business model, right? And knowing that going into it.
Yeah, it's that fear factor. And I tell people all the time, especially young entrepreneurs, I say, look, the worst thing that can happen is you fail, but you're not going to die, and you'll be
Right.
able to recover. So,
Yes.
what are you afraid of? Because there's a lot of people that have some great ideas. They're stifled by fear.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
I love that. That's very much the way I think. What's the worst case that can happen here? And then if we're somewhere before that, then we're good. We're shooting there. So
That's right. That's
I
right.
love that. I love that.
Yeah. So we're getting close to the end. It was a good conversation. Any last minute thoughts, words of wisdom that you can give to entrepreneurs that are, thinking about starting a business or even in your world of, because I'm sure there are a lot of financial planners out there or people that have that skill set that are working in companies that think I could do that myself. Why don't I? Right?
Yeah.
Any words of wisdom?
Yes. So I'll say this one thing. So if you do end up getting financing, right? So if you get an SBA loan or you get a big bucket of money to this is just like your cousin or your brother-in-law who gets a big income tax return and then gets very excited and then goes and buys a piece of furniture or a down payment on a car and then just has this sense of exuberance, right? That's going to happen to you when you get that funding. Fight through that. Budget, line item for every dollar you spend, because that's got to last.
Yeah.
And I would, it's a behavioral thing. So get that right up front before you go spend all that money. So
It's funny. There's a guy that's been on the show twice. I just love him. I can't get enough of him. His name is Joe Rothley. He's out of St. Louis. I don't know if you have a dog or not, but do you know what greenies are?
yeah, we have cats, but they make greenies for cats, and it's like crack for cats. Yes.
Yeah. Well, he invented those back in the 90s. And
Wow.
he was working for the government, and his wife said, the dog's got terrible breath. And he came up with this. He tried different things. He finally, solved the problem, right? And he talks about the fact that when they started going, they had to make a commitment, he and his wife, that they were actually going to do this. And they had to sit down and they had to budget and they had to figure it out and they had to plan, because he went without a salary for 3 years while they were building that business. He said his wife was the queen of moving money around credit cards and things like that and stretching a dollar. But he went without, and he started it when he was in his 50s. The man, he sold it to Mars in somewhere around the early 2000s. And today, he has a business called a tool company called Spider, which he also started in the 2000s. And recently, he started another product for pets called Yummy Combs, which is also geared towards dogs. He's 80 years old and he's still starting businesses.
Wow.
And
Wow.
you think about, he's taking the risk with his own money at this point. But
This is his passion. This
this
is
is
what he loves to do.
it
I
is.
meet retirees like this where you have to grab them by the shoulders and say, okay, time to stop,
Yeah,
because they love doing it. That's
Yeah.
part of that. That's still that entrepreneur spirit in there. So
Yeah.
at 80, I love it. I love it.
I know. So he should be just enjoying himself, but he does. He talks about all the other things that he does, and he's got people that are running the businesses for him and with him. But he's a great guy. But it just I just thought about that when you were telling the story, and to me, he's a very good guy. Says that he and his wife are couplepreneurs.
Oh,
So
wow.
yeah,
I
it's
love
very
that.
funny. So
I
hey,
love that.
it was we're almost out of time. I got to do a couple of closing things, but I enjoyed having you. I think it was a great discussion. A lot of good insight for young entrepreneurs, older entrepreneurs, middle aged entrepreneurs, whoever. Thanks for being on. I appreciate you taking the time.
Absolutely. Phil, it was a privilege. Thank you so much for inviting me on.
Yeah, my pleasure. My pleasure. I think it was a great discussion. So. Uh, Thanks, and have a great rest of your week.
All right. You as well. You as well.
All right, thanks, Chris. Uh, I Very insightful, right? Very good conversation. I think that a little bit different perspective, right, from what we normally get, because we normally get people that have created products or are trying to sell e-commerce or consumer products, SaaS products, etc. So it's a good discussion. I'm not to belabor the point. I know the guy, he's a financial planner and he's done some really great things with that whole side of it. But I just continue to think about this 18 wheeler backing up to my house and unloading these products, because I've been there and I know what that feeling is like when those doors open and you go, oh my God, what the heck did we do to ourselves? So I love that story. I think that that's a funny one. And so anyway, it was good to have Chris on. You can look him up. He's got his own channel on YouTube, and Money Matters. You can Google him. He's so you could watch some of his shows that are on there. So again, Wall Street Journal talks to him. He's done a lot of great things with the financial planning side. Does webinars. I'm sure he has some on his YouTube channel. I'm sure he's got a lot of great information there, plus his shows. So if you we'll have all his link information in the description when the show goes into after the show airs. When you go to the site, it'll also be on our YouTube channel, and it'll be on Apple TV, Roku, etc. But all the description has all of his information, the description for this show. So if you want to get in touch with him, that's where you'll do it. I put the code back up on the screen for scanning if you want to. Again, free business planning tool. That's on my website. If you go to it, it's a great product. Anybody who's thinking about starting a business, and again, some of the things that we've talked about here, making sure that you're planning for marketing, making sure you're planning for who your customer is. As Chris said, he knows who his customer is, over 55, etc., government employees, things like that, and that enables you to really hone in on your marketing and make the most out of the amount of money that you're going to spend. So it's a great tool. Just scan that code and it'll bring you right to the page. You put in your email address and it'll get emailed to you instantly. So it's another great thing. So I appreciate you tuning in. I had a great time tonight. We've got to go, unfortunately. Tune in next week. We try and bring every week. We try and bring another exciting guest, somebody who's really done some neat things in their entrepreneurial world, somebody that we can learn from. So again, I'll see you next week, and have a great week.